Good morning. Continuing the summary and conclusion of Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We are on page 1442, Aleph Tuf Mem Beis, and discussing the contemplation, this bonus that leads to an understanding and experiencing divine unity, which is captured, of course, in the central prayer liturgy called Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. I learned Hashem Echad is Mamata L'mayla, which was the Ma'arich Be'echad that he discussed earlier, contemplating and extending the contemplation of Echad, Mamata L'mayla, working from existence and coming to realize that existence is rooted not on lower levels, but all the way in the highest levels of the divine. In other words, it's finding a place for existence within the divine plan. So first it begins by looking at existence and realizing that it's all the words of God that created the energy, that the words, Dvar Hashem is rooted in Machshava, thought is rooted in Keser, in the Keches Nalomim, Keches Atzmim, all the way up to the highest levels where God envisions existence before the Tzimtzum, and all the way to Shmai, Kol Batzmusei, where God first gives room for the very concept of another, as we learned at length. Now he's adding that Hashem Echad also has a Yichud Mamayla Lamata, which is when you're contemplating not about how existence is rooted in the divine, but how the divine is a true reality and existence is not reality, because all of existence is really divine energy. Now, it's not a contradiction, because both aspects are critical. To understand the role of existence, but also to understand that existence, its entire being, is only godliness. So, Mamat L'mayla, you're working your way to understand the role of existence, and ultimately that it is, ultimately simply that God wants it. But here, the focus, like he says, Kadam Lachtem L'mayla Lamata, that the whole of it, the sentence out was called Kol Hu Elokus. That was not the focus, even though both of them come to the same conclusion whether you go from the bottom up or top down. But the focus from the bottom up is to understand that existence is rooted in God's words, which is rooted all the way in the highest levels. Here you're coming to understand the truth of Elokus, and that existence is just an extension of that. So both his bonus, especially later, we're going to learn how they both come together, but this is the distinction. So far he's explained how everything is Elokus. He brought from Mika Moicha, from the Reb Marash, that Metzias Agashmi is be'emes the Koyach Eliki, that the physical existence is really the divine power, just like we would say that matter is really energy. You know, if someone asks you, what's a piece of matter? So matter is the energy within the matter. The molecules, the atoms, the microscopic particles, the subatomic particles, and so on. And then he continued, the koyach hamarkiv, being that everything in existence is a composite of parts. So there's that force that brings it all together, and that's the koyach haliki within it all, as we discussed. Then to explain that, he went to Ain Oid ba'elam hazeh. How do we come to all this understanding? So he says, when you think of Elam Hazeh, the Yesh in this world, it's mochriach, you have to say that the Yesh has to have a beginning. And the beginning cannot be similar to it, because then it would just be Yesh Miyesh. So you still have the question, what created the first Yesh? It's like saying everything began with the Big Bang, but then you ask someone, what was there before the Big Bang? You know, that's a mystery. So the first Yesh came from a state of Ayin, from non-existence into existence. That's the difference between Yesh Ma'ayin and Yesh Miyesh, as he explained. This is Dafka Metzias HaYesh reveals that. Because Oir reveals to you that there's a source. Light tells you the light must be coming from somewhere, and it's similar to the source. The Yesh does not tell you that there's a source, that doesn't indicate on a source that you can directly identify. So that tells you that it's an Ein Oid, that it's coming from Ischachus, that is coming from a reality that's very different than the world of the Yesh. Oir is coming from a reality similar to it. It's just the source of light and the light. In Yesh, you have to say it's coming from something from an entity that's completely beyond what she calls his chachus, and kodim in the Sava before it was created lo yoyim mitzius klau in the chadish mitzius dover malay dover from a non-existent state to an existent state, and that's the Ain Oid. Now, once you know that, then he says, you have to say that that force is constantly keeping it in existence. Because since it doesn't have any validation of its own, something has to keep it going. The fact that it's a yesh, if it's already Oid, even though Oid also needs the moyer, just for the record, you cannot have light without a source of light, but but there it's more of a, as I said, more commensurate to each other. Here, you need to have something that keeps the yesh in existence. So he calls that to this power that creates this new entity has to constantly be there. And if there was a pause in that flow, the entity would cease to be and be completely null and void. That's the difference between Ayin Beis and Ilav Ol. So Ilav Ol, cause and effect. Once there's a cause, the effect has been affected, so now the effect continues on. It doesn't need the cause to constantly keep it going. But if it's a davar chidush, like a yesh ma'ayin, it needs all the time. V'im kain. So what do we conclude from that? That even when it exists, its entire existence is the force that's keeping it in existence. Only the ayin elikia ma'ava esei mubiladei be'emes ein shum mitzias klal. So without that, it wouldn't be a mitzias at all. So what's really its true personality is that force that keeps it alive, keeps it existent. And that's where we stopped. Then we're going to continue from here. Okay, so let's continue. It's around a little more than halfway down, 2/3 of the way down. The line that begins Amahava Ese on page 1442, and the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com if you want to follow along. So now he continues, V'zehu, she'amru b'medrash Rabbah, and this is what the Medrash Rabbah, the Medrash says, Ain Oid, afilu b'chalol shalela. So he's bringing out, you may recall the pasuk, V'yidaita yem v'shavesa levavecha ki Hashem Elokim b'shamayim v'mal v'aretz b'tachas Ain Oid. This was a big theme earlier in volume 3, when he was still speaking Mata Lamaila, how Ain Oid expresses the helam of existence is coming from the koyach helam ha'atzmi of Elokus. So he spoke about Ain Oid there. So the Rebbe Rashab is bringing that back here. So earlier page, if you want to know exactly, page 1347, we're talking about around 100 pages back, where he spoke about Ain Oid. So he's bringing that, just pointing that out. I don't know if there's a connection or not, but we'll soon see. But the Medrash says, what does Ain Oid come to add? Since you say, know today, and take to heart, that Hashem Elokim, both in heaven above and earth below, what does Ain Oid come to add? There's nothing else. Ain Oid. So the Medrash says, Afilu b'chalol shalelam. That the Medrash is coming. The Medrash says the Ain Oid is coming to add that even in the space of existence, chalole would be chalol means literally a space, an empty space, a hole. But chalol shalelam means the space of earth, the space of existence. Chalol shalelam. Sometimes the chalol can be referred to vacuum, but here I think chalol means there's another word maybe in English. I have to think about it. But chalol shalelam, that even there Ain Oid. So what is that coming to add? We still need to understand. Why is that different than b'shamayim b'mal v'aretz b'tachas? You say in heaven above, shamayim b'mal v'aretz b'tachas, earth below. What's chalol shalelam different than aretz b'tachas? So we learned earlier, and here he says, "Umavur b'mokem achar," and this is also discussed, page 347, that it's referring to the Reshimu. Shezeu b'chinas haReshimu, the root of the containers, which is rooted, the tzimtzum and chol l'mokem panei left room that the containers could emerge. So it's called the Reshimu. If you remember, Reshimu is the trace, some type of trace that remains after the Tzimtzum. So the Arizal, the Eitz Chaim, he says that though the Tzimtzum was B'derech Siluk, which means a complete concealment, but some trace remained. And that trace is called Reshimu. We've discussed this at length in this class. I've given a lot of classes on it in my Chassidus, my Life Chassidus Applied, and it's been reviewed a number of times. I think Yitzchok may have even written up a summary of it. But bottom line is Reshimu. And Reshimu played a central role earlier because we were talking about the root of the containers, even higher than the root of the kav. So Reshimu is a complex and comprehensive topic, but we'll discuss it in context what he wants to say here. So he says Reshimu. V'yadua, the Reshimu, hu b'chinas keach hagvul shebe'ein sof. The Reshimu is the keach hagvul shebe'ein sof. What does that mean? That even before the Tzimtzum, where the Reshimu did not yet emerge, there was oisius, or at least potential letters, which was God's power to confine, to limit. There's the keach habligvul, is God's power to unlimited energy. Keach hagvul is the finite energy. But the finite energy before the Tzimtzum remains concealed. After the Tzimtzum, where the bligvul is concealed, then the Reshimu remains, the Koyach HaGvul remains, but it's still a Koyach HaGvul. You don't have anything there. That's why it's only a trace. You don't have, it's not Oir. The Kav, even though it's a narrow ray of light, but it's still light. It's revelation. The Reshimu is a state of concealment. So it's called the Koyach HaGvul Shebein Sof. The Zehu Sheresh HaKelim. This is the root of the containers. So the root of the energy Oir would be from the Kav, which goes back to the Oir Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, to the Oir Ablikvul, the Oir. The Koyach HaGvul is the root of God's ability to confine, to limit. So Chesed has, for example, in it the flow of love, but the Keli of Chesed creates parameters and boundaries. And that's what this is, the Sheresh HaKelim, V'chol B'chinas HaMetzias Kneda. And all existence. So the Kalim are what create the structure, excuse me, and really all of existence. If you may recall, we spoke earlier how Ain Oid he was talking about the Yesh, but then he brought Mitzias HaKelim. Because the Kalim, as opposed to Oid, Kalim is about structure. Oid is about revealing the divine energy within the structure. So it's a very different type of personality. So we're going to see how this goes back to the Ein Oid shortly. So he says all this is referring to the Reshimu, the root of the container, and the root of all Metzias. But Ain Oid, and the pasuk and the Medrash say this is what it means. Ain Oid afilu b'chalol shalelam. What does that mean? That b'bchinas hametzias dafke hu abitul de Ain Oid. So he's adding a very important emphasis here. It's not just coming to add that God is everywhere. The Shamayim Mimal, the heaven above, and earth below, and even in the space of existence. He's coming to say that in the Chalol of Chalol Shalelim, in the Reshimu, in Bechinas Metzias, you have the bitl of Ain Oid. Like he said before, Ain Oid, where do you really see that the complete true reality of God's complete Ein Oid, you see a dafke in the Yesh, in the Elam Haza. So dafke in the Kalim, or in this case the Reshimu, in the Chalol Shalelim of the Reshimu, that's where you see that power. Because in light, you see God's power to reveal. Like I said yesterday, when you see God's art, the beautiful world, what does that reveal to us? That God is a brilliant artist, the best possible artist. But it doesn't tell you about anything more than that. When you see Kalim, and you see Koyach HaGvul, and you see a Cholol, meaning you don't see Gilu, you're not seeing Bligvul, you're not seeing the infinite power of God's expression, you're not seeing revelation, you're seeing that He can create something that's different than He is. Not a reflection of Him like light, but something different, a container, another consciousness. Because remember, the Tzimtzum creates the ability for us to have our independent consciousness. That tells you that God is not bound by only expressing so-called revealed godliness. He can also express something that's concealed. And that tells you about the Ain Oid, the Ain Oid, what he calls here, of Elokus. The bitl of Ain Oid. The Be'er Shu Davik Ba'etzem, we talk about light which is attached to the core. He's adding now a third point. Before he said the Oid, first of all, reveals it has a source. Second, it's similar to the source. And now he's saying Davik Ba'etzem, because light has to be connected to its source. Sunlight cannot separate itself. It must be connected to the source. If you disconnect it, it ceases to be. So since Oid is Davik Ba'etzem, Shabitlu B'chinas Kalo Chashiv, then the bitl is a bitl, but it's only as if it doesn't exist. It's nullified in the presence of its source. You can't say it doesn't exist. You say light compared to the source of light is as if it's nothing there. Like we say, like for example, a candle in the light of the sun. So it's as if shraga b'tira, as if it's completely nullified. But it can say it's not there. That's Oid. Because Oid is at least in a mitzias of revelation. So it's true, it's not the etzem, it's not the core, it's not that which is higher than light, but what it is, it does reveal that source. Rak shenirgesh boy mekere. So it's a mitzias girl, but it feels its source. Eich shehu levade v'hu ve'ein zolose. So the light does feel, because it's bottled to the source, that how God alone, and there's nothing else but God. So that's what light reveals. But there's still existence of a light revealing it. Remember the four different expressions. Ein kamecha, efes biltecha, ein arechlecha, and ein zulasecha. So ein zulasecha, there's no other. It's not like when you say Ain Oid. Ain Oid means there's absolutely no. Ein zulasecha means there's not another like you. So that's what light reveals. Ein zulasecha. Aval mitzias Yesh, but when you talk about the Yesh, habitlahu b'chinas Ain Oid. Its bitl is a state of absolutely nothing but the source exists. Hainu shebe'emes ein b'mitzias klal. Because in truth, there's no existence. All of existence is simply the divine power within it. Its entire existence is only the Ayin Oid that keeps it existent, the Yesh. However, the distinction here is that even though it's a deeper level of bittul, but what's lacking, Oid at least feels bittul. It feels its source. Here, the Yesh Atzmei Ein Ze Nirgesh. The Yesh does not feel this. It feels itself as an independent entity. Sharihi Margish Atzmei Lemitzias. Because the Yesh does feel itself as an existent entity. This is only due to Isbaranus that you come to this conclusion. But you don't. That's why we say Yashma Hashem Echad. On our own, the Yesh, the Oid is saying, I come from a source. I have a source called the divine. The Yesh doesn't say that. The Yesh declares, I exist. But when you come to think about it, and you think deeper about it, you come to realize that there's no mitzias at all. So the Yesh, paradoxically, on one hand, feels itself as a separate entity, but on the other hand, it actually reveals, when you contemplate, that there's nothing but godliness. And Oid will only reveal the part of godliness that's revealed. So it expresses something that does exist, the divine power. Like I said, the artistry or the beauty or the expression or the manifestation of the divine revelation. Well, osid, but in the future, in the future, the Yesh will then, in a revealed way, recognize this truth. Like it says, "V'nigla kved Hashem," that the glory of God will be revealed. V'ro kol basar, emphasis on basar, that the flesh itself, the Yesh itself, will see. Ki pi Hashem diber, that is the mouth of God that's speaking, that gives it its existence. She'anira v'nigla, it'll be obvious and revealed. Echshu advar Hashem, how existence is simply the word of God. Hainu ha'ayin eliki hamahava esei, meaning the non-existence of the divine energy that's completely non-existent compared to the existence, that's what is the true reality behind all of existence. And that's what we say, as we learned earlier, that the body itself will be Elokus. Today we say the neshama is Elokus. Because the neshama is like an oir. It's a revelatory experience. Even though the neshama below does come down and it's concealed, but still it retains divine elements, a divine personality. It could have Avos Hashem, Yiras Hashem, V'haftas Hashem Elokecha through the neshama contemplating on Hashem Echad. The guf on its own, like the nefesh habamis, is busy with its own interests. But la'asid lavi, the guf itself, will reveal the elokus of the kelim itself, of the reshimu itself. This is like what we learned earlier, that the eye, today the eyesight needs an outside light to see in the dark. But in the future, the eye itself will see. So it'll be elokus. The be'emes keinu gam achshav. In truth, that's how it is right now too. The Yesh really is divine, is Elokus. The distinction is that today the Tzimtzum conceals, so we don't feel it in the Yesh. And the future will become obvious and reveal how that is its true reality. So this is, as I was saying, and I'm pretty convinced now that this is Milmayl Lamato, the Yichud Milmayl Lamato and Shema, that existence itself is Elokus. Whereas the Mamat Lamayla was that existence is rooted in Elokus, in the highest levels. And it's true, there's nothing but the Dvar Hashem that gives life, that sustains existence. But here the focus is more on what is reality. Reality is godliness. But the Yesh does not know that today. You contemplate on it. And today the Oyer does reveal, the Yesh does not reveal, but the truth is the Yesh ultimately will tell us something that even Oyer doesn't tell us, about the Ain Oid, that the only reality is God. Oyer can say, yes, I am nothing without God, but with God, here I am. I'm God's expression, I'm God's revelation. The Yesh can't say that, because the Yesh is not revealing anything. And in that concealment, paradoxically, it reveals the deepest levels of Elokus, what he's calling here Ain Oid or Ein Arech Lecha. That's what he says here. Now, this is pretty, I would say, dense. There are places this is elaborated more, but I think I gave enough explanation to understand it. I'm going to stop for any questions. Still not finished. I see the next paragraph. He continues this theme, so there's, I'm sure, more to go here to see how all this comes together.
I don't have a question, but I have a remark that I've been learning in the Devar Malchus a lot, that the Rebbe is saying that the dira and the dayar is one and the same, meaning that our guf, let's say, or our house or our planet, whatever the dira is considered, is one and the same with the dayar. In other words, it should be. That's the level that we're aspiring to, that the Yesh Amiti and the Yesh Nivra, also in this week's Sikha. So it kind of sounds like what we're saying here.
I don't know. I can't comment on that. I'm not sure if it is. And as you know, I usually don't like to bring other things because you happen to be learning that Var Malchus, but there's hundreds other Maimorim that talk about this. So I try to stick.
Right, but it sounds like what we're saying.
A lot of things sound, but sounding is not enough, frankly. You have to really learn each piece in full context. So I don't want to, I mean, if it works for you and you feel there's a commonality, fine. I will not, I can't really comment without looking at it and seeing, is he talking about the same thing or not? I'm not saying it's not connected. I'm just saying I don't have any comment.
So first, I'm sorry, Elishava, were you finished?
Yeah, I thank you. Elishava.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you for that overview of what, like, that was maybe a couple of weeks of learning, or at least a week of learning we did a while ago, and that was really eloquent. And I mean, I was taking notes like a fiend. So thank you. That was anyways, it was beautiful. My question is, I'm still personally struggling with how we learn from the Bria that there's this koach, I'm trying, I forget the phraseology, but this perpetual energy that continues to vivify the creation. I understand ilu va'alo, but it, but how I'm trying to understand how one must say that the bria and the yesh can can't exist without a perpetual continuing vivifying force, meaning Elokus. I understand it and I believe it, and I know that God is everything, and He's omnipotent, so that must mean that nothing happens without His orchestration conceptually. But intrinsically, I don't understand how the existence of something um, depends on a continual vivifying force. Like, why can't it be ilo va'alo? And I don't. And chas v'shalom, I must say, chas v'shalom. Obviously, I believe it's the case, but the logic is what I don't. I'm having a hard time understanding. How does the logic force one to conclude there is a perpetual, continuing, vivifying force?
Anything that's a chiddush needs something to keep it going. Like in the Shar Yechid, you've learned Shar Yechid Vamuna?
Bits and pieces, not the whole thing.
Okay, so if in chapter 2, there he brings an example. He says when someone builds something, yesh miyesh, ilav olul, let's say you take a piece of gold and you turn it into a ring, or you take a piece of pottery and turn it into a keli, into a vessel. So once you're done, you're done. You don't need to keep on refreshing and perpetually keeping that ring in place, because all you did was yesh miyesh. You manipulated an entity and turned it into another, reshaped it into something else. So with your chiddush is only the shape you've created, but not the very etzem of it. However, when you do something that doesn't have any precedent before, it's a completely new thing, like what he calls here derech hischachus. That's why he emphasizes hischachus. And he gives an example. Even in nature, when God creates Yamsuf, which was a miracle, it says God sent the wind and caused that the water should hold up the water like two walls, so the Jewish people could walk through the Yamsuf. So it says that the Ruach, the wind, was all night. You needed to have the wind to keep the water standing. So he asked the question, why? Why can't you just send one wind and just hold it up? Because nature of water, he says, is to fall. And as long as you want to keep it up, you have to keep the wind holding it up. It's not the nature of water. That's why I gave the example also some places about throwing a stone. Anything that's a chiddush requires perpetual investment. So wherever you have opposites, or you have something that cannot stand on its own, if you don't hold it up, it's going to fall back. It's going to gravitate back to its natural state. With yesh miyesh, you don't have that issue, because yesh miyesh is you've just changed its shape and form. You've not done anything fundamentally different. Water, to keep water standing, the fundamental difference. And that's still water standing. Imagine now creating a yesh completely, he says, even more than just keeping the water up. The whole yesh doesn't have any basis. Its whole existence is yesh ma'ayin, because there's nothing that existed before that you can say that was shaped into a yesh. It's coming from a non-existent state to an existent state. So that chiddush causes that non-existent state has to constantly, perpetually keep that existent state in place. And if you take it away, the whole thing just falls apart, just ceases to be. In other words, if God stops speaking, if I stop speaking now, you're not going to hear any words. Nothing is going to remain in the air from my words. I'm not talking about recordings, because everything is coming from my speech. I have to want to speak. So that's when we say if God wants to destroy the universe, he doesn't have to do anything. Just has to stop speaking. As soon as he stops willing existence, existence ceases to be. That means that he needs to constantly will it perpetually, or else it will cease to be. That's a summary of Shar Yechid V'Amuna and a summary of what he's saying here.
Okay, thank you. The interesting part of it is that we have no comparison, because that is the only how shall I say, the only creation in
You have a
reality,
comparison. In
yeah.
chemistry, in some places, you'll find, especially in technology today, you'll see they have to build into chips certain parts to keep certain elements together, because without it, they naturally will attack each other.
Hmm.
So there are examples of it, not in pure Yesh Ma'ayin, but
Mhm.
whenever you need something that is not natural to it, you're
Mhm.
going to need another force to keep it in place.
I see. That was the easiest way to. I know that was pshitas, but that was really helpful. What you just said, that one sentence. I think anytime you have, I have to go back and listen to it again. But the way you just said it was perfect.
Yeah. Well,
So
in a
the
way, there's a story with the Ragat Shover and Rab Chaim of Brisk, where the Ragat Shover was sharing with him an idea. He said that based on this concept, he said that when you bring two opposites together, opposites, like fire and water, if you try to keep fire and water together, it's not, they're going to repel each other. You need something to be able to keep them together. So he gave example, marriage. So we know Kasha Zivugam Kukriyas Yamsuf. Because male and female, despite their commonalities, there's certain opposites. So the Ragat told Rab Chaim, being that they're opposites, that's why it's like Kriyas Yamsuf. So the Eibishter has to constantly renew, and that's why marriage is constantly renewable. It's like a pool in Nimshachas, a perpetual force that keeps the husband and wife together. Obviously, they have to make a keli for it, etc. But so Rab Chaim said to him, "Oh, if that's the case, Mazel Tov." She said, "Why are you telling me Mazel Tov?" He says, "Because even though you were married 40 years ago, or whenever, but based on what you're saying, every second is a new Mazel Tov." So I think the Ragat Shava responded, but the Mazel Tov also is a pull in Nimshachas. So what was said then also continued, but I don't know if that's what he said. There's different versions of the story. So
That's
the same
beautiful.
idea, yeah.
that's the Gorbachev answer, but you said it's a little questionable if the Gorbachev answered
Yeah,
because
I don't know if he said it. I don't know. I once heard it. So I'm just throwing it in.
We just had a
Regardless,
discussion.
that
Sorry.
means that if okay finished.
Yes,
So let's
please
go.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, Rabbi Teichel.
So that means that the Ain Oid is coming from the Reshimu, which is in a way connected to Halam Atzmi more than the Gilui oil.
well,
Correct?
that's an additional point to what we just discussed. I was just going to review that. The key thing to keep in mind is this. Where do you see more greatness? If you see someone, let's say a teacher, a great teacher, and you see that he's able to explain an idea to intelligent students and really enlighten them and put them on their feet and really give them insights they would never have had. So obviously that's a good teacher, able to reach students and so on. However, what happens if you see suddenly the teacher does something that's not even in the world of teaching altogether? You know, the stories we hear about a Rebbe secretly going early in the morning to go help a widow or to help chop wood for the needy. And we talk about it with such a pella. Why don't you? Why is it more of a chiddush than when he's teaching his students and giving them the deepest insights in Torah? The answer is very straightforward, because there he's talking to people that are like himself, and it's the giluyim that you see in him. When you suddenly see him do something which is uncharacteristic, which means you don't really see that in him, then you realize he must have in him qualities that I would never have imagined. I thought he was a great teacher. Like I mentioned about, God is a great artist. But then suddenly you see, like there's the Gemara, sorry, the Avna de Mizgeseshba. It's a mushal in Gemara. That if you want to see the strength of somebody, you have to see what kind of stone he can pick up. So if a person picks up, let's say, 300 pounds, so it shows a very powerful person. But if suddenly you see someone comes and can pick up 1,000 pounds, you say, wow, that's a whole different category. In other words, actions and results that are not similar to what the source is reveals more about the source, deeper levels, than things that are similar. In a way, that's the point of the Reshimu and Kalim and Koyach HaGvul and ultimate Mitzias HaYesh. What he's saying, Oir, at the end of the day, Oir is unbelievable. It reveals the divine Ein Sof, unbelievable power. In a way, the mimer of Basel Lagani, Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis. But then you see a Helam Acher Helam that God can conceal and conceal deeper and deeper and deeper. Then you realize there's a mystique here, an Ein Arech that you never could have imagined. So light, as great as it will reveal, and as bleak wool, I'm not limiting it. It's not limited at all. But it's still revelation. When you suddenly see things that are mysterious, like we talked about relationships, you suddenly discover a part of the person you love that you can't really fully appreciate. But yet there's a connection there. Or you're aware of it at least. You're aware that you don't know. That connects you in a way to God that's deeper than the part that you do know. Because what you do know is in the parameters of your knowledge. Like we say, Moshe was told by Hashem, you could see my back. That you could see. I'm giving you a revelation. It's a very powerful revelation, but it's my back. It's not my pnimius. Panai, the only way you could experience my face is by not looking. So in a way, by not knowing and knowing there's something I don't know, you actually reveal, ironically, something more than that which you do know. And that's really, in a way, what he's saying here. So if you didn't have Elam Haza, you wouldn't have Ein Arech Lecha. You'd have Ein Zulasecha, Efes Biltecha, Ein Kamoicha. You'd have all kinds of understanding of God's infinitude and enormous majesty, but the Ein Arech of true, absolute, infinite distance, even beyond, you see more from the finite than from the infinite. So that God can create infinity, of course, it's God, he can do whatever he wants. But that he can even create the finite and confine or limit or conceal, create a Metzias, Yesh, Kalim, Reshimu, the different levels here that he spoke about, that's what reveals something completely beyond. And that's what he's saying here, that it's Kulei Elokus. So it's a real paradox, to be honest, because it's Dafke the Yesh that conceals God's presence, that reveals the deepest dimension of God. That's ultimately the point. Which is like counterintuitive initially, because when you start thinking about it, what's the logic? It sounds like, one second here, what are you telling me? That the lowest level of the Yesh that completely feels itself like an ego, but that's correct. That's exactly the point. The only question I have is, I'm not sure why he's not bringing the Ageres HaKedesh Siman Chaf. I have to say he's probably going to bring the next paragraph, because it's literally, when you read this, and you know that Ageres HaKedesh, it seems like the natural next step in understanding this, that the Yesh HaNivra, that feels that it doesn't have a source, comes from the Yesh HaMiti, Mitzusim Atzmusei. So I'm just looking, it's hard for me to imagine he wouldn't bring it here. But if he doesn't, there must be a good reason. So,
What's the shaykhus?
The shaykhus?
Yeah. What's the connection between that
the Yesh HaNivra, because it doesn't feel it has a source, that tells us that the only one who can create that is Atzmus, Yesh HaMiti, that Mitzusim Atzmusei, that has no source.
No, I got that, but what's the relationship between that, what you just said, and
that's the Yesh, Dafka the Yesh, that doesn't feel it has a source, that reveals to us a much higher level of Elokus than Oyer, that does feel it has a source.
That's the Ageres HaKodesh Siman Chaf?
Yeah.
Didn't. Yeah, it's one of the hardest.
He brings it many times
chapters
throughout. We learned it many times.
No, I know we have learned that. Just I have to go back and read. It's the most complicated chapter for me in all of Chassidus.
For most people. Welcome to the club. The Alter Rebbe wrote it the last few weeks of his life.
Wow.
It was very, very profound, and it is complicated. Okay. There must be a reason. I think I understand why he's not bringing it. But, I don't want to speculate yet. I don't want to speculate. Okay. Any other questions?
This is probably also why the Rebbe Maharash is saying that the Reshimu lo noga boy hatzimtzum, because the Ain Oid is in the Reshimu, comes from the.
That is correct. What you're saying is correct. And as a matter of fact, that's what he spoke about around page, let me see, 1347. Let me go back there. I think he said.
Sorry, I thought you were looking. I was going to tell Rabbi Teichel. That's a brilliant insight, Rabbi Teichel. Thank you.
That's ideal.
I never understood that until you said it.
But isn't it towards the end of the Ayin Beis?
If you want to see it inside, the Rebbe Rashab says it. I'm not taking away from Rabbi Teichel's insight, but
doesn't he say?
I got it from here.
I understand. It is,
but it's one thing to say that the Reshimu is not affected by the tzimtzum. It's another thing to say, well, that's the same thing as it doesn't feel it, because it already has it. It already has what the tzimtzum provides, and then some.
Yeah. So if you go back, if you want to have the full picture, go back to page 1269 and 1330. We discuss it at length.
But doesn't he also at the very end of Ayin Beis, the first time around we studied, he said that, I think he used the analogy of a piece of wood, that even the most inanimate of that, the true Atzmus, lies within that. That's basically seemed to be the farthest away from everything else. You know what I mean?
So that's all part of this discussion, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pages were 1269 and 13 what?
1269 and
1347, you said?
1330.
1330, I think I said.
Thank you.
Yeah, 1330. It's actually even before 13. I think it starts at 1268. Yeah. The Loi Nogabat Simsim I spoke about at length back then, and it goes back to the Chiddush of Marash. He had a whole machlekes with the Kopester about it. Yeah, not for now. Okay. Are there any other comments, questions?
This is not directly to this. When you're seeing the attitude from Hashem to Amalek, you see that this is no toleration at all. Ad kedei kach that you have to destroy not only the people, but even the animals, and with all the details of the animals. And in Tehillim, there is an expression how lucky is, talking there about Bovel, Ashri shiloiches v'nipeitzes oilo vayich el hasala. Lucky is the one that will take you infants and will crack them in the rock. This is very harsh words, but when you see what's going on today, the evil of the Hamas and etc., that this is behind anything. The only thing is just to destroy them. I think it makes it easier to understand the harsh attitude to Amalek.
How are you connecting it to what we're learning here?
No. I said it's not connected to him.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
I had one student once, not here in Champagne, by one of my children, that was a scholar, but he had such a hard understand. He couldn't understand how could David HaMelech say, Halok is the one that will nipet. How do you say nipet in English? Crush you infant to the rock. But right now, I think it's easy to understand.
But I think also that Olalayach is like Alilot and Amalek also could be, we could see Amalek as our own internal emotions. In other words, it doesn't have to manifest as a human.
No, but the pshat is Elolayich. You
Yeah, but
could
we
see
don't do
the
that. We don't do that. So we have
maybe
to drash it.
Hash-
We have to understand
Hash-
it also as drash.
Hashem was upset with Shaul HaMelech that didn't destroy all the animals, not the people, except the king, Agag. So you see the evil there today. Even the children, how the hatred that they have. You see what they did now. They give him back tomorrow, Divas and her two children. This, and even a regular person, killing, murdering, and even the living people, the way that they're coming back.
Yeah. So really, this should be off line because we're already talking about outside of Ayin Beis. So let me stop here. So we finished the paragraph on 1442, but you'll see the next paragraph continues this theme about Ein Oid that we learned from Elam Haza. So we'll learn that. We'll continue that tomorrow. So I'm stopping at the paragraph at the bottom of page 14.